Hey, what is going on, guys? We are back here with another video topic, and today it's another patient gamer review. And today the topic is on Yakuza Kiwami 2. Now, this is my third Yakuza game, starting out of course with Yakuza 0, then Yakuza Kiwami, and now Yakuza Kiwami 2. I've taken the order, I've taken the correct path and taken my time with each and every one of these Yakuza games to make sure that I get the full experience and my money's worth. And my findings are not satisfactory. Like the usual patient gamer topics, we're going to analyze every aspect of the game, and then I'll also talk a little bit about the Yakuza series in general. But of course, we'll tackle the general topics such as the gameplay, the story, the characters, the world, the user interface, spoiler section, and extra content that they've inputted over here. And I definitely will include a little bit of a spoiler section as it's necessary, so I can talk about the entire Yakuza series so far in general. And I'll definitely include the timestamps in the description so you know when to skip the spoiler section if you have not dipped your toes yet into the entire Yakuza series or Yakuza Kiwami 2 in itself. Alright guys, so let's get into the first topic: performance and UI and engine in general. Let's get into it. Now in general, I don't really consider performance and engine and these type of things in too much I don't place too much focus on these type of things, as they aren't usually as important, but I definitely think it's important for me to note and point it out in this case, because the previous two Yakuza games, Yakuza 0 and Yakuza Kiwami, are using a separate engine. For Yakuza Kiwami 2, they upgraded their hardware and they've upped the ante and used a whole completely different engine that brings a number of pros and cons to the Yakuza series as a whole. It's called the Dragon engine, and it's the engine that from what I know they started inputting from the release of Yakuza 6 and of course the development of Yakuza 6, and since then they've stuck and kept this engine going since then. Now let me give you guys my raw thoughts on the engine. The engine has changed pretty much the fundamentals of the entire game, but you can see that the foundations of the assets of the previous game definitely are here. There are some things that are still familiar, but there are a lot of things that are new. First thing I want to tackle is the combat system. Now I'm fusing this a little bit with the performance and the engine because it changes many aspects of it. So I'll kind of switch over into a little bit into the gameplay as well. It completely changes the combat system. Now the combat in this game I'd say is good and is solid, but I will be honest, I would say that it is a slight downgrade from the previous Yakuza title. So this is definitely going to take a knock in terms of the rating, because I'm comparing it to its previous titles that came out relatively soon. The combat system has unfortunately been not dumbed down, but the amount of combat styles and opportunities have definitely been limited. In the previous Yakuza games, you had a number of combat styles that you could delve deep into with their own separate upgrade trees. In Yakuza Kiwami 2, there's only one fighting style with of course very varying and different types of moves. You can upgrade it, and the aspects of the previous varied fighting styles are in this new fighting stance, but they're mixed in and matched. There aren't any particularly strong fighting styles like before, because before we had very cool and unique fighting styles that played in their very own unique styles, such as the Beast, Rush, and Brawler mode. The Rush was known for its great speed and agility, the Brawler was the much more balanced one, and the Beast one was for dealing with crowds and picking up heavy objects. All of these has been fused into the fighting style that you use now. But unfortunately, the fighting style and the fighting techniques that you can use are not as deep as they were before, because it's all been kind of diluted, you could say, into one more simpler fighting style that you can sink your teeth to and I guess enjoy. And I would say it is satisfying. There definitely is some changes to it in terms of the combat, and in terms of the physics have definitely changed. In that sense, I mean that ragdolling and such has become a lot more easier to execute. While in the previous Yakuza games, the combat felt a little bit more weighty, a little bit more stiff and grounded. In this game, it seems a little bit more floaty. gravity seems to have been taken a notch down, and when you throw or punch an enemy with a charged attack or the very powerful charged attack or very powerful punch, the enemy is going to go flying away. And so those are just a number of the changes to the gameplay. Now, if you were to ask me, is it an upgrade or downgrade from the previous gameplay system? It's difficult to say, because in terms of visuals, I would definitely have to say it has been upgraded. The Dragon Engine, in terms of the combat and the flashiness of the combat and the combat executions, has definitely been upgraded. But in terms of the actual combat depth, and in terms of that being fun and exciting, I'd have to say it has downgraded. So it's somewhere in the middle. As I said before, the Dragon Engine has unfortunately brought some pros and cons to the entire Yakuza Kiwami 2 experience. So it's going to be very interesting to see how this pans out in the rest of the aspects. Now that we've considered a little bit of performance in the gameplay, let me switch a little bit back into the performance side. Now, before the previous Yakuza games, because of the that engine that they were using, we were blessed to be able to play a Yakuza at 1080p 60 FPS. So even if you're playing on the older system, the PlayStation 4, playing the Yakuza games back then must have been absolutely sensational to have such a strong game, strong story, strong gameplay at 60 FPS way back in 2016. That must have been a great experience. And even me, as someone who played it quite recently in 2020, I had definitely a great experience with Yakuza 0. But now, unfortunately, because of the upgrade in visuals and the changing of the engine, the performance has unfortunately gone down. The visual fidelity is interesting. Because of the Dragon Engine, I understand that in terms of cutscenes and such, they're able to do a little bit more, and the cutscenes, I will not lie, the cutscenes do definitely look better. But unfortunately, because of this, we have lost that great 60 frames per second that made the Yakuza combat and entire experience that much better. It's been downgraded to the measly standard 30 FPS. They've been able to maintain the resolution of 1080p, but unfortunately we've had to experience a drop in terms of the frames per second. And if you're coming off the back end of those other two Yakuza games, it's definitely going to be jarring, and you're definitely going to be feeling it. But if you are owner of a PS4, this is kind of standard. Unfortunately, because of the hardware available to us, if you're playing on the PlayStation 4, it's kind of to be expected that you're going to be playing at that frame rate anyway. Now, guys, that we've considered the gameplay, I want to go a little bit deeper into the user interface and the gameplay mechanics, including the upgrade system that has been changed to in Yakuza Kiwami 2. Now, if you played Yakuza Kiwami, it's going to be a little bit similar. They completely changed from the style that they used over in Yakuza 0, from using that chain style of upgrading and using money. They've definitely kept it to these upgrade point systems, and there are different tiers in which you can upgrade Kiryu, whether it be the battle, the life skill, or the heat action bars. And as you play the game, you'll gain more experience points and you'll be able to upgrade Kiryu incrementally. Now, for me personally, one of the issues that I have with a lot of Japanese titles, particularly JRPGs such as Persona 5 and including Yakuza, is that unfortunately in a lot of the aspects of the game, while they're able to curate a sensational experience, they unfortunately prioritize quantity over quality. A very hugely extensive upgrade system is not very good or effective because you end up forgetting the amount of abilities that you can execute. There's too many options, and eventually the player or the individual playing the game will feel overwhelmed and not even know of all the abilities that they're capable of, and may end up missing out on some very cool abilities that they have. I think a part of this is, while the tutorial system is definitely okay, I think they've just provided too much to us and not enough abilities that seamlessly work with the combat. And another issue that I felt that was really prevalent in this game is that a lot of the upgrades in the game are inconsequential and not really that great. You spend quite a bit of experience points upgrading your attack and heat, but unfortunately in terms of gameplay, it doesn't translate to a very high level. I'd have to say there are perhaps only 2 upgrades that really felt, particularly important. I'd say one of the things that you will upgrade is the extreme heat mode that you can unlock. Once, if you play the game and once you get your heat, essentially the blue bar under your health bar, once that reaches the maximum level, you get the extreme heat mode where you do a little bit more damage and you're able to do some very cool, unique heat actions that look very cool and do a whole lot of damage. And that's definitely something cool that you can interact with. But other than that and a few other upgrades, the upgrade system doesn't feel that great. When you level up or improve your character, you don't feel that much stronger, nor does it translate into a curated or very different experience. Or something else that I want to point out is in previous Yakuza games, weapons are king. If you definitely ensure that you buy and pick up weapons for the various enemies, you're going to easily win all of your battles, regardless of the difficulty level that you're playing on. If you just make sure that you're well stocked on weapons at all times, you're going to be good. And I will note that it is not easy to become rich in Yakuza Kiwami 2 like it was back in 0. In Yakuza 0, there was a lot of opportunities for you to become very rich, even if you ignore the substantial amount of the side content. Definitely not going to be happening here. In terms of user interface, I'd say it's very satisfactory. You're not going to experience any issues with it. You're going to know what's happening at all times. Things are very seamless. It looks good. The visuals have definitely been upgraded. While there have been some stylistic changes, it's very cool and looks good. I have not really any complaints in terms of the user interface. Just, a little bit of an issue of there not being any substantial growth in your character as you continue with it. And that I mean by in terms of gameplay that is substantial. Now, gentlemen, I want to place a little bit more focus on the world and how you interact with the world, including a little bit of the side content there, and particularly on the changes that are made because of the integration of the new engine, the Dragon engine. Now, there are a couple of changes that you'll see and feel immediately. Firstly, of course, the visual changes. Because of the huge visual changes, the entire vibe of the entire area has completely changed. Now, understandably, from the originals, using a completely different engine, so the way that things definitely look a whole lot different. But what I will say is that I feel that a large amount of the authenticity in the Yakuza series has been lost, unfortunately, because of them choosing to choose and adopt to this engine. The authenticity is gone. It no longer feels as real of a city as it was before because of them changing over to this style. And I will say probably the biggest issue that I face in terms of the world and in the way that it looks and in terms of the style is that unfortunately the majority of the world that you're in, Kamurocho and in Sotembori, look very, very homogeneous. And that's very, very unfortunately. One of the things that that were clear to me and stood out to me is that the two cities, particularly in Yakuza 0, the two cities of Kamurocho and Sotembori looked very, very different, had their own unique styles, and it was very clear that this is a different type of place. I'm in a whole different city, the river and everything. But unfortunately, because of this new stylized, new sleek style of the Dragon engine, everything looks very similar. You cannot tell the difference between whether you're in Kamurocho or Sotembori. The only way you'll be able to tell the difference is by either you looking at the map or you walking around and seeing the river and realizing, oh, okay, now I'm in Sotembori. And that's quite unfortunate in my opinion, that I feel that a little bit of the authenticity, particularly in the world design, has been lost. Now, that is one of the cons of them switching over to this engine. One of the huge pros of them moving on to this engine is that the seamless interactions with the shops and environments. There's a whole lot more destructibility in Yakuza Kiwami 2, and you can feel it in terms of the gameplay and everything. But I'd say one of the biggest interactive changes in terms of the world is that you can enter shops and stores seamlessly, and you know what that means. You can continue fighting your enemies and drag them into these shops, and there are unique heat actions that have been created that you can execute inside each individual shops. Something very, very cool. Now, in terms of immersion, that's one of the pros. You are now more immersed. Everything feels real because everything is now connected. Your enemies are going to follow you even if you go into the medical or pharmaceutical shop so you can get some upgrades or get some extra health. They're gonna follow you wherever you go, so don't think that you are safe, not by a long shot. And I'd say that's definitely one of the pros of this new Dragon engine. And while I do agree and think that the authenticity of the world has somewhat been lost because of this new stylized thing, I would be lying if I said that the visuals have taken a dip. The visuals definitely look great. The city really looks great. It looks really good. And I would say that it is closer to reality and modern society in the way that it looks. In this day and age, it looks really good. It looks cool, but as I said, a little bit of the authenticity is gone. But would be a lie to say that the world doesn't look stunning as it is right now. Now guys, let's consider the story and the characters. We're not going to include any spoilers in terms of this. We'll just give you a little bit of a baseline of the information of what's happening over here so you can understand what is going on. Now, essentially, the premise of the story in this tale is that Yakuza and Yakuza Kiwami 2, unfortunately, Kiryu, after finally having a peaceful life with his essentially adopted daughter that he got from his old childhood love, Yumi. Her name is Haruka, and they've essentially built and started a life together. He's essentially being the fun little stepdad, taking care of Haruka, living a good and peaceful life away from crime. But of course, for this story to happen, he can't stay living that comfortable life, and he's unfortunately pulled back into the plight of the Tojo clan as he is called by Terada, and something happens and he's forced, obligated to come back into the fold and get busy. And that's essentially the premise of the entire game. The main antagonists of this story are essentially three organizations. The ones I'm going to name are going to be the main family. You already know of them, the Omi Alliance. They are essentially the Tojo clan's rivals. And the other one is another smaller little clan from the Omi Alliance, but they have staged a little bit of a coup d'etat to fight. But they're also the other antagonists, and the proposal of that coup d'etat is essentially the main antagonist, Ryuji Goda, the other guy on the cover of the game, the guy with the blonde hair, very formidable fighter, and he's essentially the one who's fighting the Tojo clan and Kiryu Kazuma in general. And there is one other factor and other organization that is to play, but you'll find that out when you finally get your hands on the game. Now, in terms of the story and characters, it's a okay story. It'll definitely keep you engaged throughout. You can be satisfied with the story. There are, I wouldn't say any plot holes, so you aren't going to be annoyed by anything like that. The dialogue is decent and solid as it usually is in the Yakuza games, particularly from Yakuza Kiwami and Yakuza Kiwami 2, that the dialogue quality and plot quality are somewhat consistent on that level. And if you've played that before, you're not going to be charged or confused or like what's happened to the quality. No, it's solid, it's consistent, it's alright. You won't be sad with that. The characters, there are some returning characters, of course, with the Kiryu, Date-san, Haruka, and a few others. But there definitely are some new characters that you're going to be interacting with, including the various villains that you will be fighting, and some few fan favorite characters do make their return to the series. So guys, in terms of the story, it's okay. Now, the thing about the Yakuza games is that one of the strongest points, one of the reasons that you'll keep coming back to them is because of the story. So it's very vital that these games deliver to you a strong narrative, because the other aspects of the games, particularly the gameplay, is usually, in my opinion, not strong enough to keep a player engaged for the entire duration. For example, there are games such as Dark Souls, where it's essentially a dance between satisfying and good gameplay, sensational exploration, and upgrading and cool weapons, and player built design. But what's special about that entire game is that gameplay and level design are the main factors of the game, and that's what keeps you coming back to the experience. That is not the case here in Yakuza. In terms of level design, that's pretty much non-existent. It is an open world game, so it's less necessary. In terms of the gameplay is serviceable, but it's not going to keep you addicted or coming back to the Yakuza series. Okay guys, we've gotten to that special time of that we're going to be considering the spoiler section of Yakuza Kiwami 2. And note these, I'm going to include spoilers for Yakuza 0, Yakuza Kiwami, and Yakuza Kiwami 2, of course. So I'm going to put the link in the description so you ensure that you do not, not spoiled on anything that we're going to talk about. This is, strictly for the Yakuza fans who are, well versed in the series and want to have a little bit of a conversation or discussion about this entire situation. Let's get right into the spoilers. Now guys, there are two ways in which I can review the story and spoiler section of Yakuza Kiwami 2. I can review it in terms of it being an independent thing, it being its own game on its own, and compare it and consider the previous title and the entire series as a whole. Now, firstly, I'm going to consider it as its own independent thing. That's what I'm going to do. I'm going to consider it on its own, considering what it brought to the table. How is the entire experience? Now, this is what I'm going to say. Kiryu, the relationship between Kiryu and Sayama, it was decently developed. It was definitely more so on the cliche side. The progression of their relationship felt authentic. And by the time that they fell in love with each other, it definitely was satisfactory, and I was okay with it. Now, considering the entire plot, fortunately, in the end, I did find it a wee bit ridiculous, particularly when you consider the ending. The ending did feel a little bit wild, but one complaint that I unfortunately have to say that it unfortunately went for a little bit too long. That it had to, because by the end of it, the story felt a little bit artificially lengthened, particularly at the point when Ryuji had when Kiryu was tired at the club and he was fighting the other of the Kyokukas, or the rest of Ryuji Koda's men, and he was over at the club and he says, "Oh, wait for me, our time will finally come. Our time will finally come. Our time will finally come." It felt unnecessary, because when he fought and got Haruka back at the castle, that was the perfect time for him to finally fight Ryuji Goda and end this entire debacle. But it felt unfortunately artificially lengthened because of some of the things that were happening in the story. And it's okay for a story to be lengthened and such if it's hitting the necessary markers to keep you engaged, but unfortunately it lost me at a number of certain parts during the game. Majima was included in this title, but he was definitely much more of a side character in there. Ever since they took quite a drastic turn with this character, I've been okay with his involvement being less in this series. So yes, guys, in terms of spoilers and in terms of the ending of the entire thing, personally, I was bothered by the fact that Kiryu didn't take the smart decision to perhaps knock out Ryuji and them run away from the bomb that was over there. Perhaps if he received some medical attention, he could have been saved. There are people in Yakuza who have been hurt to a very similar level but have survived the injuries that he sustained. So a little bit of an issue of consistency in terms of injuries is a bit of an issue in the Yakuza series, and it's an issue in a number of anime in general and Japanese media entertainment. But a little bit disappointed on that side. But in terms of the plots and considering all of these things, it really wasn't that great, guys. It was alright, but if I were to just give the narrative and considering and call it a standalone, don't even consider the previous Yakuza titles, just consider it as a standalone title, Yakuza Kiwami 2, or it was the first Yakuza game. There's no context, because whether this is a good or a bad thing, the way that the story was set up, you could have never played any Yakuza game and had a great time, because the previous events and previous characters are not really mentioned that much. Yes, Shintaro Kazama and the things that he did, yes, but you didn't need to know his previous character from the previous games. As long as you know that he was a father figure to Kiryu and Kiryu loved him, that's really all you needed to know. You didn't need to play the previous game titles to have some previous love or care for anything that was happening here. Kiryu was the same as he always is, the cool badass, but unfortunately he's not very smooth with the ladies, but respect to him for finally shooting his shot with Sayama and going straight for the kiss. Now, if we consider Yakuza Kiwami 2 as part of a game series, and you playing it after Yakuza 0 and you playing it after Yakuza Kiwami, it's a bit of an issue. Now, what I will say is that it's not as good as Yakuza 0. That's the first thing I'll say. And I'd say Yakuza 0 is kind of suffering from success. I started out essentially with the magnum opus, and everything else just isn't hitting the mark as well. Now, comparing to Yakuza Kiwami, the one I played before, while I personally had a number of issues with that game, I kind of think it was better than this one. Like, I'll be honest, while I was annoyed with that game, I was more annoyed because I was very fresh. Not very fresh, but Yakuza 0 was still strong in my mind, and I still had very, very high expectations for the series. So the jarring gulf in class and gulf in quality dip was very disturbing, and that's why I was very annoyed with Yakuza Kiwami. But Yakuza Kiwami 2, by the time I played this game, I had some lower expectations, and unfortunately it was unable to keep me very engaged for very long. Now guys, let's get on over to the all-important value section, as this is a patient gamer review. Now, while I will point out that there aren't exactly a huge amount of distinct or qualities of the game that stand out, but in terms of value, the Yakuza series definitely does not disappoint. In terms of value for money, the experience that they provide, you're definitely never going to feel ripped off from purchasing a Yakuza game, particularly if it's an older title. Now guys, if we head on over to PS deals, and if you're over here in South Africa, if you make sure and make the intelligent decision to go ahead and pick up Yakuza Kiwami 2 on a good and deep sale, if you have a good internet connection and have a PSN account, you can get it for the low price of 82 Rand and 25 cents if you're down here in South Africa. Now, if you're over there in the US, the price that you'll have to pay, if you also make the intelligent decision to get it on sale, guys, get it on sale. Don't make the foolish decision to buy it full price. Particularly on these online stores, the prices do not drop. The prices, let me hear me say this. The prices do not drop for these games ever. The only times where you will see the proper deflated price for a game title is when they're on sale. The sale price over the years continues to deflate as time goes on, so make sure that you pick up these games on sale. So if you do pick up Yakuza Kiwami 2 on sale, you pick it up for the low price of $4.99. Definitely not going to be breaking the bank at all. In terms of the pricing alone, this, in my opinion, makes the game already a little bit more attractive. Even if you are a little bit perhaps on the fence on the title, the price definitely makes it an easier decision to be making, as you're not going to be hurt even if you end up not enjoying the game. Now, if you were pleasantly surprised in terms of the pricing of Yakuza Kiwami 2, you'll be definitely even more surprised and happy with the amount of playtime that you'll be getting from the entire experience. Now, for me personally, I pretty much focused a lot more on the main story, as I had a lot less interest in terms of the side content this time around. Now, if you look over on how long to beat, if you push onward and only do the main story, you'll get about 18.5 hours, which is already, in my opinion, a pretty long narrative experience. You're definitely going to be getting your money's worth. $5, come on guys. You're not going to be feeling the pinch at all from that. $5 is not going to hurt you at all, and with that playtime, you can be heavily satisfied. And if you consider, if you do a decent amount of the side content, which it has a lot of, you're going to get a satisfactory 36 hours. Now I will say that the wackiness and the enjoyment of the side content is definitely more enjoyable if you have not played the previous Yakuza titles, but if you have played the previous Yakuza titles, perhaps you'll find a little bit less enjoyment from the goofiness of the sub-stories that Yakuza provides. But yeah, definitely if I were to describe those sub-stories, it definitely is quality over quantity, because there's a huge amount of sub-stories involved there, and as you complete these sub-stories, you'll receive a number of benefits as you can continue to play the game and throughout this entire experience in general. So yeah guys, definitely a steal. Oh, and if you guys are over on PC and you are wondering how much Yakuza Kiwami is gonna cost you, if you kid on over here to GG Deals, you'll be able to see that the historical low for Yakuza Kiwami 2 is $3.99. If you pick it over from the Microsoft Store, you're going to get it for a pretty nice and easy price. Very good, very lucrative deal right here, my G's. Very nice. It's definitely not going to be hurting the bank or your wallet in any sense. Easy purchase, whether you enjoy the experience or not. Now gentlemen, let's get on over to the overall rating. What are my overall thoughts on the entire experience of Yakuza Kiwami 2? How do I feel about it? What would I give the game out of 10? Now, if we consider all the different aspects of it, then this is that the various pros and cons of them changing over to the Dragon engine, the various changes that resulted into the gameplay, the user interface, the visuals, and the world. It's results in a very interesting mixed bag that has some good and some bad, but definitely an enjoyable experience at the end of the day. You could relate it to licorice. You know, it's got some ups and it's got some downs if it's someone who's really accustomed to it, but at the end of the day, it ends up as a decent experience. Now, if I were to give Yakuza Kiwami 2, we consider the gameplay was alright. It may be a little bit more ragdolly, and they may have lost the physics. Definitely is still a whole lot of fun, compounded with the increased interactivity of you being able to fight your enemies in the drugstore, in the grocery store. Definitely had some great immersion and a fun element to the game. In terms of the characters and the story, compared to the previous Yakuza games, the characters are definitely not as strong, but they are serviceable and they do execute the job well. Kiryu stays Kiryu, and he stays being a badass, and he keeps taking care of business like he should. Shout out. And of course, Majima, we don't want to talk about Majima. I fell in love with him in Yakuza 0, and the way he's changed is I'm not a fan of what's happened to him, or the person who he actually was before he was reinvented and created into such a great character model in Yakuza 0. But if you consider all these things, in my opinion, I would have to give Yakuza Kiwami 2 a 6 out of 10. As I mentioned before, compared to Yakuza Kiwami, I'm not sure what I gave that, but I think I gave it a score similar to a 6, but this one I definitely do give it a 6. It is a mixed bag. There are pros and cons to the changes that they've made, and they suffer the consequences of that, but overall a decent experience, slightly above average because of the sum of its parts. There are some things that are really endearing. I think it's definitely a 6 if you've never played a Yakuza game before and this is your first experience. But if you have played a Yakuza game, I think it would have to be a 5 average. It doesn't really blow you away in any sense. But I think that's a fair rating. If you have never played the Yakuza games before and this is your first introduction to the series and all the characters, a 6 is definitely fine. But if you have played the Yakuza games before, you've played 0, you've played Kiwami, you've played a number of the other titles, 5 is a fair rating. So guys, hopefully you enjoyed the video. Hopefully you can we will have a little bit of a discussion down there in the comments on my thoughts. Definitely I'm more so on the controversial and unpopular side, but I just had to get my feelings out on how I felt about the entire experience, man. It's a decent game, bro, but man, it fails to slap. It doesn't slap as hard as its predecessor, man, and you can feel that impact. Even if you consider it as a standalone title, you know, don't compare it to its previous title. It's just a cliche cop crime drama, bro. Like nothing crazy, G. Nothing crazy. But man, hey man, like, comment, subscribe. Tell me your thoughts down there in the comments. Let's have a discussion. Let's have a discussion. If you got some issues, let's disagree. Say your piece. We're all open. We're open to dialogue. That's what this is all about. It's for the love of gaming. We want to make the entire medium better. And the only way we're going to be able to do so is by having constructive and interesting conversations, man. Hope you guys enjoyed the video. Explicit Sage out.